In the aftermath of Donald Trump's risky and unnecessary 12-hour trade war with a key Latin America trading partner, liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov dropped some much-needed fact checks on her four MAGA co-hosts as they dishonestly tried to take a victory lap on Trump's behalf. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a clip to watch here of Jessica Tarlov, who has the toughest job in mainstream media, taking on four MAGA co-hosts and hecklers who cherry pick stories and facts to benefit their MAGA narrative. And despite the fact that she is outnumbered on enemy terrain, she more than holds her own. For context, before we play this clip, you may recall over the weekend that Donald Trump triggered an unnecessary trade war with Colombia, one of our biggest trading partners in Latin America, a country that we actually enjoy a trade surplus with, one of the few countries where if you define advantage by trade surplus versus trade deficit, we have a surplus. It benefits us. And over the deportation of undocumented immigrants, Donald Trump risked a trade war that would cost American consumers in terms of coffee, flowers, and other prices, including oil, I might add, gas. So with that in mind, it was ultimately resolved. We'll get into the nitty-gritty, but I want you to hear some of the fact checks from Jessica Tarlov as her MAGA co-host tried to take a Trump-inspired victory lap.
And how does that feel, Jessica? Getting rid of chaos? Does it feel good?
I've never felt this good. Totally revived.
But he did show that there's a way to use deterrence as in a peace through strength sort of way, using economic and diplomatic means.
Sure, but I'm not exactly sure what he was accomplishing that's any different from what had already gone on. So according to the ICE statistics, 28,635 Colombians have left our country between 2021 and 2024. I don't see any reason besides a show of force that he wanted to switch to a military plane versus the charters they were already going in. And it's about 3 times more expensive. I think it can be up to $852,000 for a 12-hour flight, which was what it should be about to get it back there. Also concerned about the signal that this sends to the world vis-a-vis our allies. So no one would dispute that Colombia has been a great ally to America. And when South American countries look around, and we should keep in mind, of course, that China is their number 2 biggest trading partner. So are we pushing these countries into the arms of our enemies? If they look at how we're treating Panama, Colombia, Mexico, are they going to turn around and say, hey, I'd like to be aligned with you? I see Jesse and Janine are writing. They obviously have something to say.
I would like to write, but I'm holding I am not picking up my pen.
No.
I'm drawing.
Because
beautiful.
That is really beautiful. Those are like in the doodle books. Anyway, so what I think Trump wants to create with this is a fiction about what was going on under the Biden administration. Like, they never deported anybody. I woke up one day and I'm the first person to send a Colombian back. Now, I understand President Petro misplayed the hand on it, saying that they have to be returned with dignity. And he did offer his own plane. He said, I'll send the presidential plane to get them. And then online, there were all sorts of rumors that these people were shackled, et cetera. I have no idea the type of conditions within that military plane. But I do know that it's more expensive. I do know that we got out nearly 29,000 Colombians. And I do know that we are saying to our allies that we're going to start needless fights with you. There's nothing that we wanted from them any different than for them to continue accepting planes, which they had been under the Biden administration.
That's so important. It really is. She laid out a couple of things. Number one, this is not a cost-effective way of deporting undocumented Colombians, number one. Number two, we had a seamless, smooth deportation relationship with Colombia under the Biden administration. Why couldn't Trump just competently continue that? And number three, Trump really didn't get anything out of this. Now, the way the Trump administration tried to spin this Sunday night was that it was a total capitulation by Colombia. Colombia bent the knee to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the final hand on top. This was Carolyn Levitt, the press secretary for Donald Trump. This is what the official statement was. The government of Colombia has agreed to all of Donald Trump's terms, including the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia returned from the United States, including on U.S. military aircraft, without limitation or delay. Based on this agreement, the fully drafted IEEPA tariffs and sanctions will be held in reserve and not signed unless Colombia fails to honor this agreement. The visa sanctions issued by the State Department and enhanced inspections from Customs and Border Protection will remain in effect until the first plane load of Colombian deportees is successfully returned. Today's events make clear to the world that America is respected again. Trump will continue to fiercely protect our nation's sovereignty, and he expects all other nations of the world to fully cooperate in accepting the deportation of their civilians illegally present in the United States. Except we've actually seen some investigative reporting in the aftermath that actually digs into this a bit more and suggests that it really wasn't a full capitulation. In fact, for the most part, it's the Colombian government that got what they wanted. So as the New York Times reports, Luis Gilberto Murillo, Colombia's outgoing foreign minister, who was closely involved with the negotiations with the U.S. government on Sunday, said in an interview that Mr. Petro, that's the president of Colombia, had two reasons for blocking the U.S. flights. Quote, the first and most important, he said, was the dignified treatment of Colombians. He does not agree with people being in handcuffs on those flights. The other issue was the use of military planes, he said. President Petro was not fully aware of a recent change under the Trump administration that allows military aircraft to be used for deportations, Mr. Murillo said. Generally, migrants being deported have been transported on planes that resemble commercial craft and are operated by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Mr. Garcia Pena said the Colombian officials relented on Sunday when U.S. officials assured them that Colombians aboard deportation flights would not be placed in handcuffs after they were returned and would be escorted by Department of Homeland Security officials, not military personnel. They were also told Colombian citizens would not be photographed aboard the flights. So, for context, the planes were an issue, but that was because the Colombian government didn't realize that Donald Trump changed the policy that had been previously in effect and worked so damn smoothly under the Biden administration, number one. But number two, the bigger issue was the dignified treatment of Colombian migrants. So when Trump threatened to drop 25% tariffs on our key Latin America trading partner, because President Petro turned two military aircraft around, refused to let these U.S. military aircraft land, and then Petro responded with 25% tariffs in retaliation. The thing that stopped this was when the U.S. official said, okay, we will treat them in a dignified way. They won't be handcuffed. You don't have to worry about it. That's it. So while the Republicans and MAGA are trying to spin this as Petro bent the knee and Donald Trump says, take it or leave it, do whatever I damn well please, that's actually not what happened. In fact, Petro got what he wanted, which is humane treatment for Colombian undocumented immigrants. The other thing that Jessica Tarlov points out in that clip is this sets not just a dangerous precedent that might give Trump some sense of short-term satisfaction, but it will make Colombia and other Latin America countries that do business with the United States much more inclined to re-examine their trade relationship with the U.S. and perhaps give more favorable terms to our geopolitical rival, China. While Colombia, as the article notes, while Colombia stood to lose more than the United States if tariffs had been imposed by both countries, experts say that alienating Colombia, an important asset for American business, could push it closer to China, its second largest trading partner, which is making inroads across Latin America. As Trump and Petro's feud escalated on Sunday, China's ambassador to Colombia said on social media that the two countries, quote, are in the best moment of our diplomatic relations. So, Trump gave Petro what he wanted, humane, dignified treatment of undocumented Colombian migrants, no longer in handcuffs, they wouldn't be photographed. And as a consequence, the country is now re-examining its trade relationships with both the United States and our chief rival. This doesn't really seem like a win, unless, of course, you look at it superficially, which is that they both barked at each other and they both stopped. Really interesting. I'll also point out, again, Jessica made a really good point, which is, Trump's whole shtick, or part of his whole shtick, I should say, is that he's the businessman, the consummate deal maker, and he's going to make government more efficient. Well, as she pointed out, putting migrants on military planes triples the cost unnecessarily. It only just makes you feel good because for some reason your weird Freudian, unmatured brain seems like there's something phallic about seeing a giant military aircraft in the air, and it just makes you feel a certain type of way. But as Jessica notes, and as Midas Touch reported, the deportation flights Trump used military jets for that Mexico refused to accept because Mexico isn't, or Colombia isn't the only country doing this, Mexico as well, cost the U.S. up to $852,000 per flight to attempt to deport just 80 migrants at a time. To compare, flights directly chartered by ICE cost just $8,577. So damn near 10 times as much. Why? For just show, for just pomp and circumstance. That sure sounds like waste, fraud, and abuse. That sure sounds like inefficiency. And yet that's precisely what Trump is doing. And also point out that even the National Review, a major conservative publication, even they are like, guys, maybe your lizard brain might interpret this as a Trump victory, but we have some reasons to be skeptical. So good on Jessica Tarlov for pointing this out, because MAGA, in one voice, is taking a victory lap that Donald Trump crushed the opposition. And to be sure, a trade war with the United States would have hurt Colombia more than the U.S. It also would have hurt the U.S. And at the end of the day, when both sides put their proverbial weapons down, it was actually Colombia that got what they wanted, because Colombia's position was, we're not going to take deportees, we're not going to take undocumented immigrants back. They were taking undocumented immigrants back. They were under the Biden administration, thousands. Their only position was, can you just treat them humanely? And finally, the Trump administration was like, okay, I guess. Sure doesn't sound like a Trump win. Sure sounds like an unnecessary and risky Trump failure, all for the sake of his pride. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.